Threshold's new annual report came out today, highlighting just how tough the past few years have been for renters.
We're joined now by Threshold's National Advocacy Manager, Anne-Marie O'Reilly, to take us through the findings and highlight what needs to change to help prevent homelessness. Good morning to you, Anne-Marie. Thank you for coming in. We're reading this morning in the Irish Times that the Department of Housing is seeking additional funding of $152 million to help in this fight against homelessness. Based on your own research, and that's what you're here to talk to us about, is that additional funding sufficient?
Well, from what I understand, that money is merely just to pay for the emergency accommodation that's needed for the 16,000 odd people that are in this situation. So that money will make sure people will have some sort of roof over their head. For an awful lot of families, for example, that's a hotel room. So it stops people being on the street, but it certainly isn't the solution to homelessness. And that's why in Threshold, we're always talking about trying to prevent homelessness, stop someone having to go into that situation. Unfortunately, the more people that are in homelessness, the longer they're there, the higher that bill is going to get.
Yeah, now your own annual report came out today, so you might talk to us a little bit about it and what we need to understand.
Yeah, so in Threshold, we helped about 19,400 households in 2024, and that's people who are renting their home and are facing some sort of difficulty in their tenancy. About a third of those people had received a notice of termination from their landlord. So their landlord was choosing to end the tenancy, possibly because they were selling it, that's usually the main reason, or they needed to move into the home themselves, or maybe a family member needed to move in. Now, landlord's entitled to do that. The difficulty is the tenant then has to find somewhere else to live. And there just aren't as many places to live, and rents are higher. But if someone comes to us in that situation, we'll have a look at the notice of termination and see, does it line up with the law? Maybe the person could have longer to stay in the home. Maybe they don't need to move out, or maybe there's other options available to them. But we also help people if they have a rent increase they might be able to afford, or maybe isn't in line with the law. Maybe the landlord isn't returning the deposit. Maybe something needs to be fixed in the home and it's not being done. Like the heating, the washing machine is broken. So the whole gamut we assist with.
You'll assist with that, but generally you're dealing with people who've been told, look, you have to leave. And those calls for your services have increased greatly.
Yeah, so we it's running at about 37% of people who are calling now because of that, and an additional maybe 15% who are calling because they're worried the landlord's going to end the tenancy, and that's because maybe there might have been a conversation had. The landlord's maybe thinking about doing it, so people really, really are worried. So about half of the people we talk to are either definitely going to lose their home or are worried it's going to happen.
Wow. So is termination of lease the biggest, I suppose, worry for tenants at the moment?
Yeah, it definitely is. And it always has been an issue. But I suppose up until a few years ago, there were maybe other housing options available. So that's why it's become more of a problem.
Okay. You guys are looking for a change in that, so if somebody takes out a contract with a landlord, you're looking for almost a minimum 6 years.
Yes, and it looks like that's going to happen, which is fantastic news. So at present, you can be paying your rent, obeying all the rules, being a perfect tenant, and still a landlord can go, do you know what, I'm actually going to sell the house, sorry, and goodbye. Whereas the government have taken on board some of our recommendations and have committed to, from March next year, introducing a system whereby if the person's paying the rent, minding their own business, not breaking the rules, they have a guaranteed 6 years in that tenancy. And at the end of the 6 years, OK, if the landlord genuinely wants to sell, they want to get out of being a landlord, many do, they're retiring, then they can go ahead and end the tenancy. But if that's not their plan, then the person gets to stay on for another 6 years. Now, if you're renting from a large landlord or maybe a company, well, those rules will be even stricter again. So the person may very well be able to stay much longer than that and not have that fear each day. And we hear that from our clients.
Sure.
I worry each day if the call is coming, if the landlord's going to ring the doorbell,
OK, there has been a little bit of movement, and in the last number of years, we're hearing more about licensees. Can you explain the difference?
Yes. So basically, a licensee is not protected by the Residential Tenancies Act, and that's the legislation that protects renters. Now, when most people think about licensees, they think about somebody living in a digs situation. So you rent a room in your landlord's house. A lot of students, for example, are in that situation. So that's the most commonly known licensee, but there are actually quite a lot of others. And in our work, we're seeing more and more of these situations. So if you rent a room from another tenant, you're actually, in fact, a licensee. And a lot of people wouldn't realise that. We have had people come to us who are living in retirement villages who actually happen to be licensees. If your place where you live is connected to your work, so it's provided by your employer, you may very well be a licensee as well. So there's a lot of examples out there. And when something goes wrong in those arrangements, you don't really have anywhere to turn. You don't have any protections. You don't have protection from rent increases. There isn't a minimum notice period. So if the landlord, if the person you rent from, I should say, wants you to leave, they can say, you need to be out today. And that's it.
Yeah.
So most licensees fall into that. Now, we'll say students who rent in student-specific accommodation, they are licensees as well, but they do have some protections. Okay. And that was done in 2019. The government.
So there's room for movement.
There is, definitely, yeah. So it is possible to give all these other licensees some protection. Now, we do recognise if you rent in the landlord's home, okay, you can't have the same protections as other renters, you know. But there's lots of those other situations where you certainly could give more protections.
Sure. Okay, now let's talk about the government issuing the new housing plan last week, because I'm curious to know what Threshold's assessment is of the overall plan.
Yeah. So overall, there was quite a number of things in there that we have been asking for. So the increased security of tenure, which, you know, we're seeing the legislation, the draft legislation coming through on that. There's a commitment to introducing a rent register, so that would give greater transparency on the rents being paid. Because right now you go to a viewing, there's an advertised rent. You know, you need to move. Who knows what rent you're going to be paying next? So those are really positive things. There are also, though, there is a proposal to allow landlords to reset rent to market rent at different intervals throughout a tenancy. That is a worry to us. And we haven't seen any projections on what that could mean to rents overall. So that is a worry, and we will be engaging with the government and the department and the minister on that. There is a commitment also to continuing to build up cost rental housing, which we think is really, really important. You know, if you can't access social housing, but nor can you afford to buy, cost rental is an option. And Threshold, along with many others, including the Housing Commission, who published their report last year, want to see a greater increase in that and social housing, because that will provide balance in the sector. But I suppose we were already quite the ways behind on the number of houses we needed to deliver. So the government really needs to be ambitious.
Yeah. It's got a 2030 target.
Yes. And they need to hit that target. They need to exceed that target, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. The positive thing is another conversation that we'll have to save for another day. Okay. But I know what they have in Northern Ireland is what we want to have here as well.
Exactly. Simple solution to a day-to-day problem.